Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome you on NextBuy Webinars. Today we will have e-auction for the nuclear plant, and in particular for CAPEX category. Our guest today is Peter Čambál, who is head of procurement in Slovakian nuclear plant and energy production. Before Peter comes, let me give a few words of introduction. So, the e-auction is always not about the e-auction itself, but it's always about the process that comes before the real e-auction. If you want to run a successful auction, you need to make sure that all the specs are aligned, all the prerequisites, all the requirements towards suppliers are aligned, that suppliers have been tested and approved. And if that doesn't happen, then you cannot run the e-auction. Those suppliers which end up in the process to the e-auction, those have to be you must be absolutely sure that they are capable to deliver once they're awarded the business. The first rule of the e-auction is there is no second chance. So this is always final. You can never have an e-auction, and if you're not satisfied with the results as a buyer, you can never say, okay, I'll run another e-auction, or that I will speak with my suppliers offline afterwards. Perhaps I got some price reduction, which I'm satisfied with, but I'm not fully satisfied with the winner of. I would prefer that the other supplier would win. Those kind of situations you can never do, because that would lose your you will lose your credibility as a buyer, and that you would also lose credibility of the e-auction tool that you are using. However, there are situations sometimes which are much more important than your credibility, and we will be talking about those today. Nuclear power plant is not a joke. This is very serious business. I'm sure we all know about that. And Peter will tell us on how procurement looks like a little bit in that industry. And if I don't have any confirmation from Maciej that we have Peter back, I'll have to run the presentation myself, which is just a joke. Of course, I know nothing about nuclear power plant. I've done more than 1,000 e-auctions in my life, but none of those was for the nuclear power plant. So I wouldn't be able to tell you anything. Okay, so there are at least few types of e-auctions that we can run. One is, my favorite is Dutch e-auction, and that one is it's very different than the classic e-auction because the price goes up. So typically, when you have when in your RFP process you collected different prices from your suppliers, you would have to start like 35–40% below the lowest price collected in the RFP. And then the price goes up like every 20 seconds or so. The price goes up by let's take an example. If we have the prices collected in the RFP, 100 euros, 110 euros, 120 euros from 3 different suppliers, the e-auction you would start would be somewhere for around 60, 65. And then every 20 seconds, the price goes up 65 and 66. 67 and so on. You got it. You got the point, right? Every 20 seconds it goes up. And until one of the suppliers says stop, that finished the auction and no one else has a move anymore. And that supplier that was the first to accept the price is automatically awarded with the business. This is one of the most brutal, I would say, the most powerful negotiation tool towards your suppliers if you are able to do that. The thing with the e-auction is, and the reason, in my opinion, why it's not so popular. Have you ever thought about it? Why isn't it popular? When I first saw the e-auction 15 or 16 years ago, I thought that in 5 years' time, everybody would use that. But then we are in 2020, and it's still not very popular. And the reason for it, in my opinion, is that the e-auction, there are 2 reasons. One is that the e-auction requires extra attention, a lot of discipline from the buyer. If you're negotiating face-to-face with your supplier, you may be not prepared. All the requirements from the business, collecting samples, evaluation of suppliers, you can do it later. You can have the discussion with your supplier, you can pretend you negotiate, but all those steps of evaluation of your suppliers, you can do it in parallel or later. Whenever you have e-auction, the e-auction will not allow you to make any mistakes in the process before, because like I said, the key thing in the e-auction is that it has to be final. And if the supplier is awarded with the business, and if supplier wins the e-auction, it has to be awarded with the business. So that's the first thing. And it, you know, it's a common myth that many say that the e-auction is to reduce your time. And I disagree with that opinion, because the e-auction would actually exceed your time. It would expand your time. You need to make sure that the steps before are really done well. So you need to run at least one RFP before, perhaps two sometimes, just to make sure that you give supplier feedback. You need to run the workshop with suppliers quite often, just to make sure that all of them understood what they're actually quoting for. You need to make sure that you have proof of concept if you buy some services. All those steps, you need to make sure that you align with the business, that whoever wins the auction will get the business. So there's so many steps that you need to take before. It will take it longer, not shorter, the whole process. But also, it will take the process proper. It will take it right. And therefore, it will allow you to get the savings and the good results of the auction. And the second reason why buyers are not so keen to jump into the auction is because the market conditions are not allowing us to. And by that I mean we do not have too many competitors. Quite often that's the thing which has to happen. You must have at least 2, 3, or 4 suppliers which are capable to deliver, and not only capable, they also need to be engaged. They need to, your business must be attractive to them enough so that they would take that step and participate in the e-auction. And sometimes, even though we have the alternative suppliers, the purchase order that we want to place in the auction is not attractive to them, and they wouldn't participate in the auction anyhow. And we have Peter with us. Peter, good afternoon. I'm so glad to see you.
Hello, good afternoon to everybody.
Yeah, good afternoon, Peter. I'm so glad to see you. How are you? Is all good with you?
Yeah, everything is good. Fortunately, no any nuclear catastrophic situation. Everything under control. So just the problem with the connection. I mean, yeah, sometimes happened.
We're very happy to see you, and that we will not hear anything in the radio or TV tomorrow that something happened in Slovakia. Thank God. And I'm so happy to see you. You know, Peter, because we have already we're 20 minutes after the schedule. Let's move on straight to the content. Peter, what do you do? What your profession? And you are heading procurement department for Slovakia Energy.
Yeah,
and
correct.
Then how many power plants do you have under your control?
Okay, I'm working. I'm in charge of. Let's say, procurement department of Slovenské Elektrárne, which is the biggest electricity producer in Slovakia. And basically, we are supporting with our services the quite various fleet of the power plants. So we are operating 2 nuclear power plants, 4 units. We are operating 2 coal-fired power plants and 30 small hydropower plants. So this is basically the basic portfolio that we are serving our services. Okay,
interesting. So I mean, you cover pretty much the entire Slovakia with energy supply.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, maybe just what with respect to my job. I mean. I'm in the, let's say, procurement field almost 20 years in different position, function, and countries. And with respect to the Slovenské Elektrárne procurement department, I mean, we are working with a yearly procurement budget about 120 150 million euro. And we are working, or we are, let's say, following the principles of category management. And basically all the procurement is centralized. So we are managing the transactional as well as strategic procurement. So
how many people in your team covering
I
those
mean, there are 40 people, 42 people, and in strategic procurement, something like 25, and the rest in transactional procurement.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that short introduction, Peter. Shall we move to the presentation? So today's topic is, I'll leave it to you. I leave it to you now. I'll just let me know when to click.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go on. Go on. Yes. So what we prepare is today, and probably you already did some introduction. So basically, what I would like to share with the participants first, that basically it's clear all of us that e-auction is just the tool. E-auction itself will not bring us the success, and the efficiency of this tool is determined by the good analytics and the knowledge, basically the information that supporting us as a procurement people for the selecting of appropriate e-auction type. So the sources of the information that we believe that we can divide would be the sources or the inputs coming from the pre-tender phase. Usually it's a tender setup and the tender and the strategy that is defined. And let's say in our organization, we try to still follow basically the we try to follow the. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All is good.
Sorry. So we try to follow basically the design to cost approach. So for the most important project, we analyzing during the pre-tender phase the specific scope, the specific tender which is under the preparation, and we trying to understand how the tender can be set up for the implementation phase in order to understand basically in order to understand the scope, the strategy, the potential supplier, and the method that can be applied for the optimization. Then, of course, the other huge source of the information for the setting the auction is the tender itself, and there are four main areas that procurement people or procurement professionals could find, let's say, the good source of the informations. And let's say our perspective is as follows. So the first area is the number of the suppliers. Of course, number of the suppliers is a good sign, which telling us what kind of e-auction we should define. That's for sure. The second, if you do not have the pre-tender phase, for example, design to cost, of course, in line with the category management, it would be great to understand what is the scope and how the scope determine the market, because from that perspective, basically we can understand and we can manage basically the tender and the final phase of the tender, which is the commercial negotiation, in the right moment. In the right moment to the basically the final phase and the definition of the approach. There are still pop-up of the messages. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you very well all the time.
Okay, good. So the next source can be bid alignment, which basically the people from procurement trying to align the bids, and they are understanding what are the setup of the bids, because once the bids are close to each other, of course, the typology of the e-auction can be defined in different way once, for example, the bids are far away, far from each other, and basically you choose the different type of the e-auction. And of course, the last but not least is the negotiation approach, which basically due to some circumstances and the specific for each business case, for example, you can define different negotiation approach and different basically information that you are expecting and to get from the tender, and that's why basically some tender e-auction, or not tender, sorry, for the e-auction can be defined. Sometimes, for example, in this negotiation approach, what I want to say is that, for example, sometimes we choose the e-auction immediately after we receive the offer, which basically is the case when we believe that we are, let's say, afraid of the leaking of the information. So we launch first the commercial round with the specific type of auction, and then we do the checking of the qualification, references, and of course at the end we are checking the technical bid. Because, for example, this is in the case when you believe and you are convinced that the technical offer is meeting our requirement, but you are scared about the other circumstances that can occur in every field, because we know that sometimes even the leaking of the information and the approach and the behavior of some of other colleagues in the power plant, in the technical units, can, let's say, jeopardize the results of the tender. So we can go on.
Okay, yeah. So thank you very much, Peter. Just to make sure that I understand it well. So you mean that there are four main pillars that you need to make sure and align before the e-auction. So how many suppliers you have, then you need to have bids aligned, and knowledge of the scope, which also, like you mentioned, sometimes because you know it so well, you know it's a matter of time after the RFP just to immediately launch the e-auction. And then the negotiation approach, which is something that I used to call awarding strategy, or right? So how would you like to award the business, and what would be your negotiation? Those four things you need to consider if you want to move on with the e-auction. Yes,
those are basically the pillars, the areas that provides procurement specialists the source of the information and the good information in order to understand the environment and understand I would say the momentum for which the e-auction type is the best to apply. So this is sort of the mix, the puzzle that should basically click to each other, and for example, for the good definition of the e-auction.